Hey, left, right, out. I wanted to do this sitting down, but I guess I'm really busy, so we're going to do a little bit in here. So I wanted to talk about this Trump raid and then also the IRS agents. I mean, I'm not going to go into the markets now, but there is some interesting stuff going on there, especially with how this market is rallying and the relationship between pretty much them sowing their own, these traders are sowing their own death warrants when it comes to, they're actually giving the green light for the Fed to keep raising as opposed to what they're thinking they're front running them now. But that's a different argument. So anyway, we've had something that happened to, I guess I would say us or the country or to an individual. It hasn't happened, I don't think, in the history of the United States. And that's a former president, the previous president being raided or having a search warrant. I'll call it a raid because it is not a conventional, I guess, a search warrant. It seemed that there was actually some armed characters there. There were some nefarious things going on, so I'll call it a raid. I don't care what the CNN calls it. Maybe not a raid in the sense that there's actually like door breaching and a lot of people being held at gunpoint, which has happened, or people being arrested. And that goes to, I guess, what the major point for myself when I'm looking at this raid. One, some of these documents they already knew about. Supposedly there's these documents, we don't know for sure what they got, but there was a number of documents the FBI or specifically the DOJ knew that Trump had. Same with Obama, he has some. But anyway, they told him to hold it and he like put it underneath a lock or lock him up, and he did. So there was like no secret what's supposedly on the search warrant, which we will see hopefully eventually. But two, it's like if there was these documents, these presidential archive things, you usually would solicit them from the said individual and see if he could work out some kind of legal means just to get those documents before getting a judge involved and then putting all these man hours into such a thing. Thirdly, when you such a high profiled individual doesn't just get, isn't just looked at the same way as everybody else, despite what whatever his name is, Merrick Garland said today. You know for a fact that the president, if you're going to raid a president for like the first time, J. Edgar Hoover used to just keep a secret file on people. Sorry, I was looking. There's kids there. I don't, Anyway, J. Edgar Hoover used to keep the secret files on presidents or senators or whatnot, and it was kind of illegal. And that stuff still goes on, but now we're doing it and trying to make it under the guise of being illegal. That's what I'm seeing here. Second, I guess the point to that is, in order to make it seem legit, it appears to me as though Merrick Garland and the sort would have had to have briefed the president and his advisors. So to me, there's no way in hell, I would bet almost all my little bit of sense that I have that Joe Biden had to have known about this, because this isn't just going to Garland's desk and he's going to be okay, let's do this. Despite his little speech today talking about it, all the law is equal for everybody, which obviously that isn't the case, because we look at blatant criminality with regards to the current president, his son especially, whether it be human trafficking, drug dealing, falsifying a federal document when it comes to like firearms, disposing of firearm near a school. Just the document alone of how he was able to come across a firearm. His nefarious dealings overseas, we know this, and there's no investigation. They don't seem to care about that. They've had his laptop for like over a year, and the FBI doesn't seem to care about that. The Clinton emails, that was a big deal. Somebody who's running for president, was a senator at the time, was a senator, was the head of the State Department, has a secret server in her personal residence, a personal residence. I don't know how many she had. Anyway, then she scrubs her phones with bleach bit, destroys them, literally hammering them. So that's not only that. Then you have somebody like Eric Holder, who, and Brennan, and all these other guys that lie in front of Congress. all the and there's many others. So many others I can't even think about. But just to keep it brief, to keep it keep this with a little bit of brevity. Couple that with, you take the Trump right now, or whatever Trump search. You take Peter Navarro. You take Roger Stone, who was woken up in the night to an actual FBI raid. And with press, somehow they knew about the search warrant, or the warrant, this raid that was going to be conducted against him. And then Navarro getting, actually handcuffed in an airport, even though he lives right across the street from like the FBI and all. And they could have just easily talked to him. Same with Roger Stone. They could have asked him to come in, but they did a raid on these older guys. Not only that, you look at how Steve Bannon is treated over just this, something that everybody does, it seems like, lie to Congress or be held in contempt, and nobody does anything. And all these other, the GNC, there's a two-tier justice system. I don't care what Eric Merritt, where I can't even remember his name, is Garland says, the once nominee for a Supreme Court seat, which we dodged a huge bullet on that one, thankfully. The one thing Mitch McConnell actually did that saved us a little bit. But anyway, all these things happen, and high-profile individuals like that don't just get signed off by some Joe Blow in the FBI. This goes to somebody's desk that has some pull. That is, if it's not Garland, it's not the head of the FBI, it's like his underlings that report to him, that give him the briefing every day. And when it comes to people with the president and the president's right hand people, the people who are advisors of the president, those things are briefed to the president. Or the former president. I mean, there were president's former, right-hand man, like Trump's guys. That goes to Biden. That he gets briefed on that stuff. Well, unless, he could be public. But at least somebody in that administration gets briefed on what's going on when it was such a high profile. Such a Rubicon crossing moment, especially when we talk about the Trump thing. That is a crossing of the Rubicon in a sense. When that stuff happens, that's going to the president. Now, here's the other thing. Now, I'm not opposed to having Trump being searched. I know there's a lot of backlash over this. I don't like it. Yes, under the circumstance. I'm not opposed. If there is a legitimate, like I said, there's documents they already knew about. Supposedly they had a mole in there, and supposedly they knew exactly where the documents. Now, why are they searching all these other places if they already have the area where these are? Because when you do a warrant, it's supposed to be very specific. And it's supposed to tell you where you're going to be searching, what you're looking for, and whatnot. Not only that, now I'm going in a whole different side topic because of that. Now I just went down a different rabbit hole on this because this really makes me mad. Is when supposedly these agents, despite what Garland said, supposedly they didn't really give him. They showed a warrant from 10 feet away, didn't give him a copy of the warrant, didn't allow the lawyers to be present, wanted them to turn off security cameras. Well, now you're wondering, well, what are they trying to do? And don't think that they can't do it. Don't think that there hasn't been instances where there has been stuff that's been planted. What if they would use the same line against the person they're searching? Well, what do you have to? What are you hiding? Well, I'd say, what are you hiding if the security cameras are going on? Because that's just the normal operations there at Mar-a-Lago. I'm sure there's security cameras all over the place. Why do you need to turn them off when you're conducting your search? What does that say for somebody that is a law enforcement agent? Anyway. I don't know where I was going with the rest of that. I just had to go down that rabbit hole because that was very fishy to me, the way that they were trying to get them to turn off the security cameras, the way they isolated the lawyers, and they went through certain areas of the house, which supposedly they had the mole that knew where these documents were being stored. And they did too. They knew they were locked. They knew where they were. I don't know what they thought they were going to find in the safe. I think that might have been an ancillary target there. And it'd be interesting to see the warrant and what they had in there, what they were supposed to search and what they were actually looking for, and then also what they recovered. I guess we'll find out later. But that's what I was getting at. Is I'm not opposed to if there's some real crimes going on, if there's real delineated suspicion of criminality going after a president. In fact, I wish they would. The problem being is when you cross that Rubicon, I guess I'll use that again, is when you have these people that are nefarious or have other, ulterior motives, they will use that precedent to attack their political enemies. So, yeah, I was mad that Trump didn't go after Clinton because there's obvious criminality there, or at least make it at least put somebody in the DOJ that would actually look into it, open an investigation, and determine some sort of what really happened, or get some, down where we have a lot of the facts, and then actually prosecute the Clintons over that, or Hillary. Or maybe not. Maybe because we don't want to cross that Rubicon, you wouldn't do that. Maybe that's why he didn't. I think he was more talked to the deep state not to do that, or people that are actually friends with them, like the Bill Barr types that are actually friends with Clinton and the Bushes and whatnot, that are moles within the administration. But needless to say, I can understand that. But look what happened anyway. He didn't do it, and look what happens. They're crossing that line of departure, where now you can use these organizations to target your political enemies. And it's one of those things where it is like a banana republic. I've heard somebody talking about how we're entering a stage of this in the history of this country where it is a banana republic. And to me, this is a telltale sign of that. And I talk about the financial stuff a lot and the economics, and that's also a sign of that. When you have a lot of fake numbers, when the government's actually going around redefining certain things without any real justification for it, other than perspective or what the way it looks, the recalculating of numbers and then trying to compare them to the old numbers when you talk about different economic indicators. Basically, complete lies, and knowingly lying, and then just denying that the facts even exist. Those are all signs of this late stage empire, banana republic. They call it banana republic, but I call it late stage empire, where you have very Romanesque into the line here, where there's a decline, where there's a last grasp of power by certain elites, despite throwing principle and virtue aside in order to get whatever resources they possibly can, and not even an attempt to really save the nation or the empire itself. So that, I've kind of been waiting for a lot more word on that before I actually said something. I wanted to come out and kind of like go into what I thought about it. Like I said, I'm not necessarily against if there's some criminality, but we are crossing a precedent with this. And especially when there's not really justification for doing that. In some of these raids, like I said, you go back into the Roger Stone stuff, Peter Navarro, and there's a couple other ones that I'm just like, they're not on my top of my head right now, but those are the two glaring ones where the FBI actually raids. And the Roger Stone one is very interesting when it comes to like the media getting tipped off to some of this stuff and showing up. So what you wonder what kind of actual communication is behind the scenes when it comes to some of these organizations, some of these in the DOJ or other organizations for that matter, and some of the media. And if not, and that in itself is an indication of like a guy that I used to listen to, Michael Savage, a government media complex, what they call the military industrial complex. There's a government media complex. There's a government media or government industrial complex. It's a definition of fascism. I know they throw fascism around a lot. Fascism is like the intermingling of the state with corporate interest. And we see that with the corporate interest aligning with the state interest when it comes to especially media, when it comes to certain narratives, when it comes to the internet-based media as well, not just legacy. So we are living in whatever degree you want to say of fascism. It's here, and the funny thing about history is when we're not going to one day just have Hitler back or whatever. These things, like, they say history, those who don't know their history are condemned to repeat it, or history always repeats itself. That's the one I was looking for. Well, that's not true. History doesn't always repeat itself. History rhymes. And what I mean by that is it will repeat itself in a certain sense, but it will never be exactly the same. And maybe that's some way we've learned a little bit about it. But the next Hitler is not coming the way Hitler exactly came. The next Hitler comes, or the next Stalin comes in similar manner, but in a different direct means. And that is maybe a derivative of the environment that he's living in today, whether it be technology or just advancement in human knowledge. We can't just say, well, we still have some sort of representation, which I don't know if we do or not, but these these institutions that exist that would supposedly checks and balances. We call it the judiciary, judicial branch, which is still semi-operational, I guess, but there's a lot of corruption in there. Um, what it, but that doesn't mean that these things can't come to pass, because we can look at it from I guess a bird's eye view. The consolidation of power in the executive branch and the obfuscation of power, the powers that they should have from the legislative branch, giving it to the executive branch, which I don't think the founders, that's one thing, with all their wisdom, the founders really didn't think about, was the fact that they always thought people would be grasping for power. So you have these checks and balances. They never, I don't think, dreamed that one branch would just willingly lay down their power as long as they got paid off, in a sense. They still have power, but they lay down their authority, I guess is the best way to say it, to another branch. And that'd be that's what the legislative branch has done with the executive branch. And I know I'm going down a whole different rabbit hole, but there's many forms of tyrannical governments. All right, so instead of looking at like a Hitler-esque or Stalin-esque when it comes to this, I like to look at the Roman Empire. I like to look at when post-Republic Roman Empire, because it's not like they didn't completely, there was representation. They didn't completely dissolve the Senate. In fact, also pre-Star Wars, the prequels talk about this. It's like, well, even if the emperor takes over, they need to keep the Senate in order to manage the rest of the empire, and that was kind of the way it was. Oh, that was I guess I'm going to save the IRS thing for another video, because we're at 16 minutes, because that's a big deal as well.